In every capital city across the world, embassies rise like silent fortresses. Their flags wave in the wind, their guards stand alert at the gates, and their golden plaques declare friendship, cooperation, and peace to an ordinary passerby. They are symbols of diplomacy. But to those who know the truth, these buildings are far more than they appear. Behind their walls, history has unfolded in whispers. Deals that never made it to public speeches were struck in hidden rooms. Betrayals were planned, lives were saved and destroyed. Espionage, secret negotiations, and shadow wars have all played out under the roof of embassies, where the world outside could see nothing, and only the walls themselves knew the truth. The concept of the embassy is as old as civilization itself. Ancient kingdoms sent emissaries across borders to negotiate trade, peace, or alliances. Over time, these emissaries needed safe places where they could live and work without fear of arrest or attack. That principle gave birth to the modern embassy, a piece of foreign land in another nation's capital. Protected by international law, it was supposed to guarantee safety and neutrality. But as with every human invention, power and ambition twisted its purpose. By the 20th century, embassies were no longer just diplomatic outposts. They had become critical nodes in the global intelligence network. Within those grand halls, every handshake had a shadow meaning. Every smile concealed a hidden agenda. The same walls that hosted formal banquets also hid microphones, safe rooms, and sometimes even tunnels. Consider the Cold War. No era better reveals the double life of embassies. Washington, Moscow, Berlin, London, these cities were littered with embassies, each of them humming with secrets. American embassies abroad became listening posts to monitor Soviet activities. Soviet embassies, in turn, served as hubs for spying on Western nations. Diplomats carried not just documents but also microfilms, encrypted codes, and even concealed gadgets. One of the most famous cases occurred in Moscow. When the US built a new embassy there in the 1970s and 80s, Soviet workers embedded hundreds of listening devices directly into the walls, beams, and concrete. By the time the Americans moved in, the entire building was effectively wired for Soviet ears. The embassy wasn't just a workplace, it was a trap. For years, US officials struggled with how to use the building without revealing sensitive information. It was a reminder that even walls could betray you. But embassies weren't just places for gathering intelligence, they were also shields, sanctuaries in times of danger. In many moments of crisis, people fleeing for their lives have rushed into foreign embassies, hoping for protection. And once inside, those walls became a line between freedom and capture. International law declared that local police and armies could not storm an embassy, at least not without risking a massive diplomatic crisis. This law created some of the most dramatic standoffs in modern history. Take the case of Cardinal Joseph Minganti in Hungary. During the Hungarian uprising of 1956, when Soviet tanks crushed the revolution, Minganti fled into the US embassy in Budapest. He lived there for 15 years, trapped inside those walls. Every day he walked the same hallways, unable to leave, unable to live a normal life, yet safe from arrest. The embassy became both his prison and his sanctuary. Another unforgettable story came in 1979, when Iranian revolutionaries stormed the US embassy in Tehran. What was supposed to be an untouchable safe space was suddenly violated. 52 American diplomats and citizens were taken hostage, and the world watched a crisis that lasted 444 days. The walls that had once represented American power now stood as a symbol of humiliation and vulnerability. Secrets stored in documents, files, and communications fell into the hands of the attackers, exposing decades of intelligence work. That single event forever changed how nations viewed the safety of their embassies. But not all embassy secrets are about sieges and hostages. Some are about escape and survival. The most cinematic example came in 1979 during the same Iranian crisis. While the main embassy staff were taken hostage, 6 American diplomats managed to evade capture. They found refuge in the Canadian embassy, hidden by Canadian diplomats at great personal risk. With the help of a daring plan involving fake movie identities, they escaped Iran. The operation later became famous as the Canadian Caper, dramatized in the film Argo. Once again, embassy walls had protected lives, but also concealed a covert rescue mission. These are just glimpses of the stories hidden behind embassy gates, and yet they show a consistent truth. Embassies are never just what they seem. Behind official receptions and smiling photographs, there are safe houses for spies, hidden transmitters, shredded documents, and plans that could topple governments. Even architecture itself plays a role in these secrets. Some embassies are built like fortresses, with reinforced bunkers, underground tunnels, and secure escape routes. Others are designed with hidden compartments for sensitive equipment. During the Cold War, embassies weren't just offices. They were tools of strategy, the placement of windows, the orientation of buildings, even the thickness of walls. Everything could matter in the game of espionage. The embassy also became a stage for psychological battles. During the Cold War, both the US and Soviets Embassies in rival capitals were under constant surveillance. KGB and CIA agents monitored who came and went, hoping to spot defectors, spies, or informants. Sometimes, embassy walls themselves were the targets. The Soviets once presented the U.S. ambassador with a wooden carving of the Great Seal of the United States. It hung proudly in his office for years, until American intelligence discovered it contained a listening device, one of the most ingenious bugs ever designed, requiring no power source at all. For nearly a decade, it transmitted secrets right out of the ambassador's office. These stories remind us of a hidden truth. The embassy is both a stage and a battlefield. It represents peace, but it often harbors war. It promises safety, but it conceals danger. It stands open to visitors, yet hides chambers that only a few will ever see. And as we move deeper into the modern world, where information is the greatest weapon of all, the walls of embassies hold even darker and more complex secrets. Cables transmitted through encrypted servers, cyber espionage centers hidden in basements, surveillance equipment disguised as cultural exchange tools. The embassy of the 21st century is a digital fortress. But even with technology, the oldest secret remains the same. Embassies are not just buildings, they are masks. To the outside world, they represent diplomacy. To the inside, they protect and sometimes expose the hidden wars of nations. The walls do not speak, but if they could, they would tell us stories of betrayal, survival, and power. Stories that never made it into history books but shaped the destiny of nations. And this is only the beginning. Because the deeper we go into the world of embassies, the more shocking the secrets become. Beneath the polished marble floors and behind those closed gates lies a world of shadows, a world where diplomacy ends and espionage begins. When we think of embassies today, we imagine heavily guarded compounds with cameras at every corner, metal detectors at every entrance, and walls that seem higher than ever before. But no matter how secure they look, the secrets hidden inside, we remain vulnerable. Because embassies are not only targets for bombs or protests, they are prime targets for intelligence agencies, hackers, and rival governance. The 21st century has brought with it a new kind of war, a silent war fought with data, surveillance, and technology. And at the heart of this war stand the embassies behind their locked gates. Basements hum with encrypted servers, antennae on rooftops capture signals, and underground rooms shield conversations from foreign ears. The embassy has evolved from being just a diplomatic outpost to becoming one of the most valuable intelligence hubs in the world. One of the most dramatic reminders of this truth came in 2013, when the world was shaken by the revelations of Edward Snowden. His leaks exposed just how deeply embassies were involved in global surveillance networks. According to the documents, American embassies around the world were being used as bases for signals intelligence. Hidden within their walls were special rooms known as special collection service sites. From these, U.S. intelligence agencies could intercept phone calls, monitor internet traffic, and track the movements of foreign leaders. In fact, it was revealed that the U.S. Embassy in Berlin had spied on German Chancellor Angela Merkel's personal phone. The shockwaves were enormous. Allies suddenly saw the embassy not as a friendly house of diplomacy, but as a fortress of surveillance. The very walls that once promised partnership now seemed like walls of betrayal. But America was not alone. Other nations had long used embassies for espionage. Russian embassies across Europe became hubs for cyber attacks, misinformation campaigns, and recruitment of spies. Chinese embassies were accused of orchestrating influence operations, gathering industrial secrets, and building vast databases of personal information from host countries. Embassies had become chess pieces in a new global game, where information was the most valuable currency. And yet, even in this high-tech era, the old human side of embassies has never disappeared. People still run to embassies when their lives are at risk, when their governments turn against them, or when they hold secrets too dangerous to keep. Take the case of Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. In 2012, facing extradition, he walked into the Ecuadorian embassy in London and never walked out again, at least not for the next 7 years. Trapped in a few rooms, surrounded by police outside, Assange turned the embassy into a stage for international drama. Supporters saw him as a fighter for truth, while opponents painted him as a fugitive manipulating the protection of diplomacy. Once again, embassy walls became both a shield and a prison. The Assange case was not unique. History is full of defectors who found safety in embassies. During the Cold War, spies who feared being caught by their own governments often fled to an embassy of the enemy. Some walked in with trembling hands, carrying documents, microfilms, or even priceless secrets that could shift the balance of global power. Inside those walls, intelligence officers would debrief them, plan their escape, and change the course of history. One of the most daring examples came in Beijing in 2012, when blind activist Chen Guangchang escaped house arrest and found refuge in the U.S. Embassy. His arrival created a diplomatic storm between China and America, threatening to derail high-level talks. But the embassy sheltered him, negotiated his safety, and eventually secured his travel to the United States. The walls once again played their role, not just as stone and mortar, but as barriers between life and death, freedom and capture. But sometimes, even embassy walls are not enough. In 1999, during the NATO bombing campaign in Yugoslavia, American forces accidentally bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. The attack killed 3 journalists and sparked massive protests. Whether accident or conspiracy, it showed that embassies once considered untouchable were no longer safe in the age of modern warfare. And then came 2012, Benghazi. The US diplomatic compound in Libya was attacked by armed militants. The ambassador, Christopher Stevens, and 3 others were killed. The world watched as flames consumed the building that was supposed to symbolize peace and cooperation. That tragedy forced governments everywhere to rethink embassy security. Once again, the walls had been breached, and the cost was human lives. What makes embassies so fascinating is the contradiction they embody. On the outside, they are draped in the language of peace, friendship, and cultural exchange. Inside, they may contain encrypted servers, safe rooms, vaults of classified files, and agents planning covert operations. To the public, they host cultural events, art exhibitions, and diplomatic receptions. To the secret world, they are listening posts, command centers, and sanctuaries for defectors. Even architecture has evolved to reflect this double life. The new US embassies, for example, are built like fortresses, massive walls, wide setbacks from streets, layers of fencing and security checks. They are designed to withstand car bombs, riots, and even cyber intrusions. Yet, for all their strength, they also signal something else: fear. The modern embassy no longer feels like a welcoming house of friendship. It feels like a citadel under siege, and yet, the real secrets aren't in the design of the walls, but in what those walls protect. In the digital age, those secrets are cables, encrypted messages, and servers storing intelligence. But the human element remains irreplaceable. A whispered conversation in a hidden room, a deal struck over a late-night dinner, or a desperate knock on the embassy gate at midnight. These remain the lifeblood of international politics. The phrase, "if these walls could talk," has never been truer than when applied to embassies. If the walls of the US embassy in Moscow could speak, they would tell stories of being bugged by the KGB, of American diplomats whispering in fear of microphones. If the walls of the Ecuadorian embassy in London could speak, they would recall endless days of tension, journalists waiting outside, and a man who rewrote the meaning of asylum. If the walls of the Canadian embassy in Tehran could speak, they would tell of disguises, fake scripts, and the daring escape of 6 Americans. Embassies are not ordinary buildings. They are the silent witnesses of history. They see wars being prevented and wars being planned. They see alliances being born and trust being broken. They see heroes hiding from capture and traitors revealing their nation's secrets. And as the future unfolds, their role will only grow more complex. Artificial intelligence, biometric surveillance, these are the new tools of power. And embassies, those silent fortresses, will be at the center of it all. Their walls may hide data centers instead of paper files, and satellites may replace microfilm, but the essence remains unchanged. Embassies are where diplomacy and espionage meet. For the ordinary passerby, an embassy may always look the same: a foreign flag, a guarded gate, an imposing building. But for those who know, every embassy is a theater of shadows. Beneath its walls lie stories too dangerous to tell, secrets too explosive to reveal, and truths that could shake nations if ever exposed. So the next time you walk past an embassy, pause for a moment. Look at those walls. Behind them lies not just diplomacy, but a hidden battlefield. Not just peace talks, but power struggles. Not just safety, but danger. The walls may never speak, but they hold the greatest secrets of our age, because within every embassy, beneath every polished floor and behind every locked door, history is still being written, and the walls know everything.